The World Economic Forum is an international, non-governmental, and lobbying organization for multinational companies based out of Geneva, Switzerland. It was founded in 1971 by Klaus Schwab. They engage business, political, academic, and other leaders of society to shape the global agenda. It holds an event every year in Davos, Switzerland, hosting billionaires, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and some of the world's most powerful political figures. Listen to what Klaus Schwab said at this event in 2017.
But can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants, and we measure your brain waves, and I can immediately tell you how the people react, or I can feel how the people react to your answers.
Nida A. Farahani is a lawyer specializing in neuroethics. She's also a WEF agenda contributor. Here's a quick clip of her at the WEF in 2016.
There's some really interesting research that we can plant false memories in the brain. And in a different context, one of the emerging areas that's really interesting in law neuroscience is pain detection. And once we understand the circuitries that cause pain, I guess the question is, could we then instill pain and use that in many coercive measures in the legal system as well? So.
Wow.
Yuval Harari is another WEF agenda contributor. He's also an Israeli author on military history and a philosopher. He spoke at the World Economic Forum in 2018 and 2020. Here's what he said.
Why is data so important? It's important because we've reached the point when we can hack not just computers, we can hack human beings and other organisms. Now, what do you need in order to hack a human being? You need two things. You need a lot of computing power, and you need a lot of data, especially biometric data. But control of data might enable human elites to do something even more radical than just build digital dictatorships. By hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself. Because once you can hack something, you can usually also engineer it.
What they're talking about are technologies that connect human beings with computers. This is any technology where a computer interacts with the human mind and or body. Here are some articles about these kinds of technologies. Harvard Business Review. Are you ready for tech that connects to your brain? Futurism. Scientists have invented a mind-reading machine that visualizes your thoughts. We can take someone's memory and pull it out of their brain. Smithsonian. This device can hear you talking to yourself. Science News. An AI can decode speech from brain activity with surprising accuracy. NBC News. The Army is developing synthetic telepathy. Synthetic telepathy was actually patented in 2005, which we'll get to later. However, technology has made major advancements since then. Barack Obama funded the National Institute of Health's Brain Initiative in 2013, which to this date has invested more than $2.4 billion into mapping the brain. The purpose is to gain a deeper understanding of how the brain functions. Michio Kaku is a professor in theoretical physics. Here he is talking about this.
President Barack Obama wanted to spend $1 billion to map the brain. But you see, once you map the brain, then you can begin to connect the mind to computers, telepathy, telekinesis, recording memories, photographing dreams, things that you see right in the Hollywood movies will be able to perform.
What's the potential time frame for all of this?
We can record memories now. In mice, for example, we've been able to record the memories ricocheting through the hippocampus. We reinsert the memory in, and the mouse remembered. This means that the short-term goal is a brain pacemaker for Alzheimer's patients. You push a button, and the memories are inserted into the hippocampus of an Alzheimer's patient. But perhaps in the next decade, you'll be able to experience the vacation that you never had.
How?
By recording the memories and then putting it on a tape and then having these memories reinserted into your mind.
It sounds like there are some ethical issues with that.
One problem is if criminals get memories of a crime and insert them into innocent people, then eyewitness accounts get very blurry. When you say, tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, well, what happens if the memory you have is not correct? These have to be regulated.
Much of the reporting about these technologies talk about it in a positive light, focusing on the abilities it can do for good, like assisting people with Alzheimer's. However, DARPA is also heavily invested in the research and development of this technology. DARPA stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They're an arm of the United States military apparatus with the specific purpose of developing advanced weapon systems. They reportedly are working on cyborg technologies. Dr. James Giordano is a DARPA neuroscientist. I will reference him several times throughout this presentation. He specializes in neuroethics, as well as the study of neurobiology in relation to brain function, and also neurotechnologies.
So with that introduction, Dr. Giordano, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, it's great to be back. Thank you very much.
So just to kick us off and to kind of level set before we dive in deeper, can you define what you mean by the word neuroweapons?
You know, the idea of using any instrument or method as means of contending against others is a very formal definition of a weapon. It need not be something that is malevolent per se, but again, by operational definition, what a weapon does is in some way alters that individual's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, physical nature, health, in such a way that is going to be more amenable to the individual who is yielding the weapon. So in other words, I'm changing an individual's stance towards me in some way and making them engage in a stance that's more aligned with what I want them to be. That's a formal definition of a weapon that comes right out of the Oxford English Dictionary. Clearly, when we think of weapons, we think of things like bombs, tanks, planes, boats, soldiers. And that's not incorrect. I mean, I think the more colloquial use of a weapon represents some instrument that's going to induce some kind of morbidity or mortality. And when utilized in these bellicose constructs, that's certainly one of the ideas of weaponology. But weaponology, as we discussed last time, can also include things that I do to my own forces, whether it's the human resources or whether the actual forces themselves, to make them more efficient in their mission of national security, intelligence, and defense, not only in terms of what I do to others. In that sense, if we put the neuro prefix to weapon, what we're really looking at is harnessing the neurological system, both peripherally and centrally, and its functions of thought, emotions, and behavior, so as to then yield instruments, methods, techniques, tactics, and tools that can then be leveraged against others, so as for us to then gain some purchase over their thoughts, emotions, and conduct. So a neuroweapon is essentially any weaponized method or tool that acts through the nervous system or at the nervous system, upon the nervous system, to influence and change the attitudes, feelings, thoughts, behaviors of others.
Now let's do a little bit of a deeper dive into what he's saying.
We can also utilize these interventional technologies in those ways that may able to directly affect the brain. Probably the one that you've heard about most recently, most contemporaneously in the literature, is the possibility to use some form of directed energy to affect physiology peripherally and also to affect the physiology and health of the brain. Case in point here, U.S. Embassy personnel in Havana and possibly in China. And of course, there's not a lot that I can tell you about that, although I am one of the researchers on that particular project. But this seems to be wholly indicative and supportive of the fact that this was at least some form of directed energy, whether it was wholly intentional or not, still remains to be definitively decided. However, the pattern of insult and injury to those individuals and the pattern of injury of who was affected strongly suggests that this was an intentional and directed engagement, and that this represents a beta test, a possible probe of a directed energy neuroweapon. And there are a number of countries that had developed initiatives and agenda towards developing just these types of things, the United States included. Clearly, one of the things we can also do is transcranial neuromodulation, the idea of going through the skull to modulate the node and network activity of the brain, to optimize the performance of key individuals in certain tasks and performances that are relative to their missional space. And we can also do that against hostile or perhaps belligerent others. We can go further to implant certain brain-machine interfaces. These are many of the DARPA programs that you may hear of now. Probably the one that is most notorious, in a very good sense, is something called the N3 program, which is the non-invasive neurosurgical neuromodulation program being run by their program manager, Dr. Al Mundi. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely.
As he said, neuromodulation plus reading and writing into brain function can be done remotely. Neuromodulation is the alteration of nerve activity through targeted delivery of stimulus, such as electrical stimulation or optogenetics, to specific neurological sites in the body. Activation or modulation of the targeted neurons can influence the storage and release of hormones. Many hormones serve as a chemical precursor to feelings and emotion, and they can influence other behavioral and biological responses. Dr. Giordano also said DARPA is working on brain-machine interfaces with minimal size electrodes so that all this can be done remotely. This is a wireless system that connects people with computers via nanotechnology. Essentially, these technologies monitor and record brain activity. Over a period of time, this system maps out an individual's brain and all of its processes. This includes thoughts, emotions, and other physiologic responses. An exact digital replica of that person and all their brain and body's activity are recorded and stored on a supercomputer, which is then continuously updated in real time to feed the model of that person. Thought patterns, feelings, and beliefs all stored as algorithms over a timeline in a program on a computer. It can then alter those thoughts and feelings to create a belief system and send them back to the individual to control their behavior. And because these thoughts are essentially a clone of one's own, they can be indistinguishable from one's own and therefore undetectable. In 2006, Purdue University released a paper which can be found on their official website called The Sentient World Simulation. It was developed by Purdue University's Synthetic Environment for Analysis and Simulations Lab and was the culmination of 10 years of research funded by the Department of Defense, which DARPA is a division of. The ultimate goal was for Sentient World Simulation to be a continuously running, continually updated mirror model of the real world that can be used to predict and evaluate future events and courses of action. The Sentient World Simulation reacts to actual events that occur anywhere in the world and incorporates newly sensed data from the real world. This virtual environment replicates the behaviors and interactions of real-world entities, including individuals, organizations, and nations. It's used to analyze and simulate complex scenarios, providing insights into various domains such as social dynamics, economics, and geopolitical situations. It should be noted that Purdue University has several agenda contributors posted on the World Economic Forum website. When this sentient world simulation is put together with the technologies which Dr. Giordano, Noah Harari, and Michio Kaku are explaining, what you get is a computer program that has the capability to influence people and events in the material world, where people's thoughts and actions are directly influenced by artificial intelligence. This is Pekka Lundmark. He's the CEO of Nokia, and he spoke at the World Economic Forum in 2022.
I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.